Three, two, one, roll the footage. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Simon Severino, your host. And today we have core values activist, former rock star, and one of his country's top 10 motivational speakers. Welcome, everybody, Brant Menswar.
Thank you, Simon. So great to be here with you this morning.
Excited to have you here. And I want to know everything about your latest book, about the process of coming up with this book, how the book changed you and what it is all about. And then I want to explore your entrepreneurial stuff because you have a hot software that you are building and is changing the world. But let's start with the book. Why did you start writing a book?
Well, this was my second book. The first book that I wrote came out 3 or 4 years ago called Rock and Roll With It, Overcoming the Challenge of Change. And it looks specifically at the two types of change that we face. The intentional change that we want to make, I want to lose 10, 20 pounds. And then the unintentional change that is sometimes forced upon us that we have to deal with. And so how do you deal with each type of change, right? And so the success of that book sort of led to the last book that came out last year called Black Sheep. And it was centered around the idea of why black sheep are not valued by farmers like the rest of the flock. And when I found out the truth, it really led to me writing this book and hopefully connecting with people and letting them understand what it means to truly be a black sheep. So I think most of us, when we think of that, when we think of the connotation of black sheep, it's sort of an outcast, right? Sort of that person that hangs out on the edges and they don't fit in. But the truth is the reason that farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock is because a black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. So every black sheep, in effect, is 100% authentically original, and it can't be made into something it wasn't meant to be. So when I heard that, it certainly made me feel better about feeling like a black sheep for most of my life. But more importantly, it made me sort of ask the questions as to what makes me a black sheep. What are those non-negotiable values, those personal core values that make me who I am? And so the book helps you discover your flock of 5. What are those 5 non-negotiable values that are unique to you, and teaches you how to prove that they're real and then how to employ them and activate them in your life on a daily basis.
And why 5 and not 3 or 19?
Yeah, good question. So, the truth is that we have an assessment that goes along with the Black Sheep book and course. And the idea is it presents you with about 125 commonly held personal core values. And it asks the people taking it to just select any word that really resonates with you. What's a value that you deem really important to you? And after 10,000 plus people have taken the assessment, what we know is that the average person selects at least 30 different values that they deem really important in their lives. And why that's important is because human nature is going to be to try to satisfy those 30 things on a daily basis, which is setting yourself up for it's just impossible, right? I don't use that word very often, but it's truly impossible to sustain and honor 30 different values on a regular basis. When I say regular basis, I mean daily. The idea of when you discover your 5, you have to program them into your calendar. You have to pick and choose where they show up and what impact they're going to have in your meetings. So for me, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity. That's my flock. I have 6. It's not unusual to have one more or one less. But the truth is, if you're going to activate them, if you're going to lean into them and sort of manifest them on a daily basis, you can't really have more than 5 or 6 and do it consistently. You could have 3. It's rare that someone is that focused. If they have 3, what I would say is that all of our values exist in a hierarchy, sort of within the family of values that exist for that vertical. And so they would be at the very, very top. They would have to have the highest value in the hierarchy to only have 3, because that would allow it to cover many more sort of sub values that would fall underneath.
Wow. And so how do you plan to serve your 5 values today? Do you have some examples?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example is that, when I look at my calendar and you see that we're going to record this podcast today, it's not just the appointment time that you see. In this particular one, there's two things that are written next to it. One is creativity and the other is hope.
Hmm.
So for me, it's my job during our time together today to make sure that creativity comes to the forefront and that everyone has to leave with hope. If they don't leave with hope, that's my fault if they don't experience that. And so I'm being very deliberate with my intention during our time together today to make sure that these two values have the impact that I desire.
Wow. And so when you think about your day, for example, about your day tomorrow, you literally think about these five, and it's like text that you add to
Mm-hmm.
your day. Wow.
Every single appointment, you're going to see at least two, if not three or four, of these values written in next to it, so that I can be deliberate with my intention. The truth is, if you can't tell me what your five non-negotiable values are, explain to me why you chose them and the impact they've had in your life and how you amplify them every day, then you're winging it. I'm quite familiar because I was winging it for 47 plus years. So I'm an expert at winging it. Um, but when you start to be deliberate with your intention, when you go into meetings and conversations with deliberate intention, you'll be shocked at the difference of outcomes that you have. Because even though we can't control outcomes, when we are leading with the things that matter most to us, you'll find that the power of connection is amplified 10x.
Absolutely. And it makes such a difference if you go with an intention, or you go into something and you
Mhm.
stumble into a meeting. Powerful. What made you realize that this is important?
So for me, it was a personal story. My oldest son Theo, when he was 14, was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, and he needed to get a bone marrow transplant in order to survive. And it was sort of during that process, several times we were at a crossroads where the doctors told us he wasn't going to make it. And I realized in those moments when they told me specifically one specific time that they sort of were at the point where they said, you've got to go and say your goodbyes if this is something you choose to do. When I got into that uh, sort of moment with him, I was fumbling because I didn't have really any anchors to hold me to. My emotions had gotten the better of me. And when we don't have these values established and they're not these ironclad non-negotiables, then when you're in the middle of a tornado, you're trying to reach for the values that are swirling around you, 30, 40 at a time. And it's not a comfortable feeling. Right. You never really truly feel like you said what you needed to say, or the conversation went the direction you wanted it to. And so, fortunately we got lucky in that time and he survived. But unfortunately we lost Theo in February to COVID. And, I was able to have another conversation in that moment and say all the things that I needed to say, and make sure that I honored creativity and hope and impact and empathy and family and authenticity. All those things were at the forefront of that conversation. So, I as sad and upsetting as it is, um, I can feel good that I didn't leave anything on the table.
And so in that moment, if you had family defined, then you would pick family and say, this is the rock that I stand upon now, and this is the place from which I speak, and that would have helped.
More than that, it's that family is the focus in that moment, and don't be distracted by all the other things that are going on. When you're in an
Mm.
ICU unit, there's a million things going on around you that are easily distractions. So stay focused on family, but more importantly, when you are focused on family, what is it you're focusing on? You need to hold on to hope until that very last second that you can, right? And so there is no question of what those conversations were filled with. They were filled with hope, and they were filled with empathy of feeling what was happening in the moment, and me being authentically me. And that's it's so important to remember those things in difficult times, because all you can control is the decisions that you make in the moment. You can't control the outcomes of what happened afterwards. And so you have to feel good about those decisions. And I don't know how you can feel good when you're winging it. You have to be activating these things that are at the very core of who you are in order to feel like you've done what you needed to do.
Do these core values change? For example, family.
Mhm.
I had no core value family before I was a father. I had more athletic core values like I'm a triathlete or whatever. And
Mhm.
and that shifted when I became a father. Do these core values change? How often should we revisit?
Yeah. So core values don't change. Most of our core values are etched in stone by the time we're in our early 20s. What I would tell you is that you had family labeled as something different for yourself. You might say now that family might be one, but in fact, family is in the hierarchy of connection. So at the very top of that hierarchy of values is connection. So family is an example of connection. Faith is an example of connection. Relationships, community, all of those things are examples of connection. So the very top value in that hierarchy of that type of value is connection. So you are still experiencing connection. If we were to guess right now, I would tell you that connection is probably one of your, just from the nature of what you do every day and how your business is structured, the coaching, all of that is centered on connection. So connection would be one of your black sheep values. Family is simply an example of how you
Mm.
experience connection. So is your business. So is your colleagues, your coworkers, your all those things, clients. They're all forms of connection.
Ah, so tell us about the categories. You say there are some that are on top and
Mm-hmm.
are categories, and then there are subsets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, when you take the assessment, and we'll make sure we give everybody it's a free assessment. We'll make sure everyone gets a link to take it if they are interested in it. But ultimately, when the assessment, you start taking it presents you with about 125 commonly held core values. And the after you sort of select the ones that are important to you, you are required to group them by likeness, right? And so you'll have things like sympathy, empathy, caring for others. Those all fit into one sort of box because they're all related to each other. Success, achievement, again, things like that go in another box because they're related to each other. And as you sort of work through these words, you find that it reveals a lot about you, about what words you choose to put together because you think they're related. Number one, it tells me a lot about you when I look at the words that you put together, and then we start to look and see sometimes when people say they don't experience, because in the proving process, let's say you get to your five, what happens after you get to what your five black sheep values are is you have to prove them that they're actually real and not just something that you think is real. Because what we know now after so many people taking it, the initial five that you come up with, two or three of them are absolutely real. And you have got 20 examples over the course of your life that you can prove that they're real and they make sense. But two or three of them beyond that are complete fabricated BS. And that's for a variety of reasons, right? It could be that you have been conditioned to care for other people's sheep your whole life, which happens a lot, right? If you grew up caring for a parent, a grandparent, a child, you were in a single parent household and you were responsible for siblings or all those sorts of things, you've been conditioned to care for other people's sheep. And oftentimes we mistake those for our own, and that doesn't work well. You have to feed yours first. And so the idea is 2 weeks worth of tracking these values. Do they appear organically in your life on a regular basis? If the answer is yes, there's a good chance they're true. If the answer is no, then it's one or two things, really. It's you've got the wrong value. You've allowed someone to project that value onto you, and that's why it's not showing up, because it's not yours. Or secondly, when we look at those sorts of things as well, it could be that you've drilled down a little too far. So, for instance, if you told me that, um, faith was one of your non-negotiable values, and you spent a year in isolation because of the pandemic and you never went to church, does that mean that faith is not one of your core values because you didn't experience it as you normally would in a in a normal sort of situation. No, the truth is that the value there is truly connection, and you are experiencing that connection through your faith community, through your belief in a higher power, through the reading of texts, through, a variety of things. And so in those instances, when you drill down too far, if you sort of eliminate the ability for that to happen, it can often appear that it's not your value. But the truth is, it is in the family of values. You just have to level up a few sort of levels to get to the point where you are at the right value in the hierarchy.
I love it. And I will take the test afterwards. My first hunch is that my 3 values will be something around connection, creativity, courage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I mean, just knowing your business as I've had a chance to take a look at, I would agree with you 100%. The question is those 2 others, right? Those are the outliers that oftentimes we neglect. When you are focused on 3 and only 3, if you're too nailed down, I mean, those are pretty specific values, right? And you can show courage in a variety of different areas. Connection is going to be all over the place for you. It'll be the most popular value. In fact, connection is the number 1 shared value among humans by a 50% margin to the next closest value, which is integrity. And the number 3 value is authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we start to look at these values that resonate across the board with everyone, it's because they're very subjective in nature, right? And so what is courageous to you? Is courageous standing up to an unruly client, or is courageous climbing Mount Everest, right? I mean, it's a very wide definition. And so one of the things that we always have people do when they say, here are my non-negotiable values, is they have to define what they mean by that. And so I need to know what your definition of courage is. What's your definition of connection? Because if you don't define those things, you end up winging it or trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
I will take the test, and everybody should. And now let's move to the SaaS. So you have built something wonderful, and it's a software-based solution. So tell us, how did you start building it?
Last year, when my book was coming out, I had it was published through Page 2 Publishing in Vancouver. Had a wonderful experience with Page 2 and their team, helping me put this book together. They're a professional publisher. They're sort of in the hybrid model, outside of traditional publishing. So I maintained creative control and sort of where I wanted the book to go and how I wanted it to be sort of placed in the market. But I still had to hire a publicist, and so I did, and I hired a publicist and spent gobs of money and had just a horrible experience. Like, they did nothing. I think I got a psychic podcast. It's what I got. So I was not very happy with the results. And so I ended up taking sort of the book back from them, letting them go, and trying to find innovative ways to market my book. And so, I spent the last 20 years prior to this in the music business as a rock star with 2 different bands, and traveled the world and had an opportunity to make music my living for a long time. And so I started to employ some of the same tactics that we would use to promote our music, to promote books, and it started to work. And so my business partner, Jim Knight, who was an executive with Hard Rock for 21 years, ran their learning and development program, and one of the people sort of responsible for the culture that is Hard Rock that we all know and love, sort of went to him and said, I think there's this gap in the market for an innovative digital book marketing program that just doesn't exist right now, that doesn't have to cost, a new car. And so we had this idea of an app. What if we took the same technology that 44 million people in the United States use on a daily basis, which are dating apps? What if we use that same structure, and instead of matching people with people, we match people with books? And so let's take the same questions that someone would need to fill out to start a dating profile on a Match.com or an eHarmony or a Tinder or whatever your dating app of choice is. Let's take 9 questions and let's wrap a book review around answers to those questions. And so the app is called Booky. And we take 9 questions from actual dating apps, and we have our staff of writers craft book dating profiles, which are really innovative book reviews that you can swipe right or left on in the app and decide whether or not you want to take that book on a date. Twice a week on Wednesday nights and on Saturday nights. In the middle of the night, you get a Booky call from the app. It is a text that comes to you, a notification through the app that says you up, and then it presents you with 3 potential books for you to book up with. And so we've launched 2 months ago and are already at 100,000 users in
Wow.
205 countries and territories. The app is exploding. I think we're at 21 on staff now at Booky Call. So we are just holding on with white knuckles right now, trying not to screw things up.
That's perfect. And so, and this is for more for readers or more for people who have written a book and want to promote it, or for both?
Yes, yes, and right. So we sort of serve 2 communities. We serve authors and publishers. So we have, some of the traditional big publishers that are looking for ways to promote books and get their books in front of a targeted audience. So when you join the app, you have to tell the app what you normally like to read. And so it presents you with about 10 different categories of fiction and 10 categories of nonfiction. And you use these sliders to say how much you read those types of books. The app creates an algorithm specifically to you and starts to, recommend books based on that algorithm. So for us, we can tell you how many people swipe in self-help or personal development, or they swipe in contemporary romance, or, science fiction, historical fiction. We have 20 different categories of books within the app itself. And then on the author side, we want to make sure that we present an option for authors that aren't with a major publisher, right? That don't have a ton of money to go out and spend to promote. So we've made it incredibly affordable. The book is only a maximum of 5,000 books in our library. That allows us to have 160,000% better chance of your book matching a reader than on Amazon. And so because of that, it really is the most affordable targeted promotion for authors that exists today.
Wow, because I'm an author, so I have to do the
Mm-hmm.
test after this. I have to go to. I have so many
Send us that
homeworks
book.
now.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So that's your software. And it's funny, you started as a musician and now you are a software entrepreneur. How is that transition?
It's a little strange. Some forced learning. When you get into app development, you start to learn that it's not just, hey, I'm gonna, take this software and find a coder. And I mean, there's 10 different people who have their hands in the cookie jar, and it's sort of like the medical world is how I explain it, Simon, is that it's everybody's a specialist, right? Nobody's a generalist. You don't have a primary care physician in the app development world. You've got 10 different specialists that only do this one thing. And so if you need 5 things done, you have to contract 5 different people because they only do what they do, and they don't cross streams, right? And so it's been interesting on that front for sure. But here we go back to the black sheep values. This app is
Mm.
literally a manifestation of my black sheep values, right? Of creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity. This is what you experience in the app. You can't call an app Booky Call and have a kitschy experience with the app. You've got to make it an elevated experience. The creativity has to be there. It's got to give readers hope that you can actually match them with a book that is something they're going to like. It has to be authentic and bold in nature, right? It's got to be a little irreverent. We're doing something that's never been done before, and so I think that's why we're experiencing the explosive growth that we are. It is cost effective on one side, but it's just using a different part of your brain to get you to choose what you want to read next. I mean, what are your options if you didn't have Booky Call? You can ask a friend, you can read the back of a book, you can go into a bookstore and waste 2 or 3 hours trying to figure out what you're going to read next. These sort of book dating profiles are structured in the same way that you would choose a person to date. So you're more emotionally engaged with these reviews than anything you've read in your life, because they are presented to you as if you're going to take this book on a date.
I love the idea, and it's fun. And it's a two-sided marketplace. As a strategy advisor, I always recommend go for the two-sided marketplace, because you have two magnets. More users bring in more publishers.
That's right.
More publishers
That's right.
bring in more users, bring in more
That's
authors, bring in more readers. And then
100%.
it's harder, you have a moat, and it's harder to disrupt. Try disrupt Google. Try disrupt something that is a two-sided marketplace, and it has network effects. You have no chance.
That's right.
No chance.
Agreed. 100%.
I love it. And what are you excited about looking forward? Now, the end of this year, looking to the next year.
We've got some pretty exciting sort of plans in place for the app as to how we can expand on the algorithm. We are looking at, part of our goal is diversity and inclusion, to make sure that readers feel like there are books in the library that represent them, with authors as well, right? That we accept books from all people of all kinds, on all subjects. And so, ideally, we are going to set up in 2022 speed dating events with partner bookstores all over the country, where we use the location services function of the app to promote these dating nights, where you will go with friends to a local bookstore and, basically look at 10 different books, 5 fiction and 5 nonfiction, in a speed dating format, where you get 5 minutes to read the profile of the book. You can listen to a little clip of the audiobook and decide whether you want to take that book on a date. If you do, you take a copy of the book with you, and at the end of the night, you bring all those books into the to the register, and then that local bookstore makes all the revenue from that night. And so, we're trying to support the local mom and pop brick and mortars, and keep them alive and healthy. So we've got big plans for sort of that as well. And then we're already talking about potential spinoffs into the children's book space, which would be a bit of a right turn, but a lot of repurposed coding that we could use in the app to have something specific to children's books. The top 2 books in publishing genres, so right now, are children's books and cookbooks.
Oh,
so
I wrote the wrong book.
Yeah. Well, you and me both, brother. I'm trying to figure out how to turn Black Sheep into a children's book.
Yeah,
but
the little black sheep.
That's exactly right.
And
so,
his piggy friend.
It's right. It is. So there's here's a challenge in the market.
By the way, Peppa Pig is amazing, and Blaze the Monster Machine. I am literally in awe when my kids, they're 3 and 6, when they go Peppa Pig, but especially Blaze, because Blaze, at some point, he has this lava, and then he has to change tires. He doesn't just change the tires. He goes, okay, and now scream with me, lava power, and then everybody in my kitchen goes, lava power, and I go like, wow, these guys know how to create an experience, right? When I have a workshop, nobody goes lava power.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And if they do, those are called cults, Simon. Yeah. And that's where we have a bit of a challenge in those cases. Yes. Yes.
But yeah, children books, I get it, because they're doing a great job.
Yep. It's a low point of entry, right? So anybody can get on Amazon through Amazon Publishing and through Kindle Publishing and do a children's book, right? You don't have to invest $20,000-$30,000 into a book to get it into the market. If you're doing a short children's book, you can hire a graphic designer on Fiverr, and you've got a couple $100 into a book that you self-publish through Kindle, and then there you have it. Put a little money into promotion and Google ads, and before you know it, you've got a #1 best-selling book in children's books released on a Tuesday with blue in the title. And there's so many categories in Amazon now that you can become a bestseller in, it's a little open market for everybody.
So wow, you are really on fire. You started first thing, 2 months live, it has already so many users, and you have already an adjacent opportunity where you can clone it and even start a second full-fledged software there. Wow. All right. Where can people get a hold of you? Where can they do the values audit?
You can go to findyourblacksheep.com is the easiest way to do this. And then the assessment's right on the site. You can go to Brant Menswar, BrantMenswar.com. The assessment's there as well. That's my speaking site where I do most of my keynote speaking. So you can experience that there too. So those are the two easiest ways to go. Findyourblacksheep.com is the book's website, so that you can actually get there and see what other people are saying and doing. And there's some additional information on that site with regards to the book and assessment.
Super cool. And Brant, who should be my next guest?
So I've got two for you. Very different. It just depends on the direction you want to go. I would say on one side, you've got Jim Knight, who is my business partner and a culture expert. And in sort of the nature of the business that you coach, culture's everything. And so he is an incredibly successful learning and development specialist with Hard Rock for 21 years. Literally sort of wrote the book, the Bible on culture, called Culture That Rocks. One of my favorite books I've ever read. And it's really about 3 books in one. I told him he just made a big mistake. He could have had a trilogy there if he wanted to. So he would be one on the culture side. On the other side is a guy named Brian Fanzo. And Brian is a digital futurist who has spoken for years on the keynote circuit. He's a millennial. He is a pager wearing millennial, as he would call himself. But he is sort of on the forefront of NFTs and Web3 and, all this new, the future of what sort of this market's going to look like. And what does digital ownership really mean? I mean, I don't think there's still that many people out there that understand non-fungible tokens and what that effect might have in a digital metaverse where ownership now is something different, right? Web3. So if you looked at Web2, where it's more you can just publish to the internet and everybody can read it, Web3 is about ownership, right? You can actually own a piece of it, which is something completely new and a thought that no one's really up to now ever had an opportunity to think through. So he's at the very cutting edge of that. He's actually doing a project right now, I think, where it's 360. He's doing an NFT every day for a year as part of a project. So I always enjoy listening to him. He keeps me sort of at least with a finger in what's happening or about to happen in the future, so I don't get left behind.
Absolutely. This was wonderful, Brant. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your wisdom, your tools with us. I'm now gonna hop and do the audit and find my values.
All right.
Thank you
Love
so
it.
much.
Thank you so much, brother.
Keep rolling.
Avoid trying to do thousands of things that doesn't work. We have 274 templates for your business success. Reach your ambitious goals with one-on-one sprint coach. We double your revenue in 90 days.